Thank you. So, growing up, I was probably the most traditional classical violinist that any of you could imagine. So I grew up playing nothing but Mozart and Beethoven, all of the music that you would hear in the background of a jewelry commercial, that was me. And while others my age were doing these silly things like going outside and making friends, I was always getting ready for that next orchestra concert. And that was my life for many years. But then after one of these concerts, something happened that changed my life. I got home and I was sitting in my bedroom and I heard a knock on the door. And I look up and it was my mother. But she wasn't saying a word, she was completely silent with this frozen look on her face. And that was the night that she told me that she had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And before I could say a word, she just starts to tell me all of these different stories from her childhood. How she was always making things with her hands and how she was making clothes and jewelry, and how now she had all these regrets that perhaps she would never have a chance to bring any of these ideas to the world. And after that night, days passed, weeks passed, and I'm so fortunate to say that her cancer went into remission and that she was a survivor. But you see, our conversation that night, it still haunted me because it forced me to look at my own life and ask, was I just on a path to have that same moment of regret later in life? And so I began to look at my life, I began to look at music through a whole new perspective. And I began to return to that same orchestra with this renewed sense of energy. Now, by show of hands, who here has been to a live orchestra concert before? Okay, great. So for the two people that haven't, there's this very particular span of time in the beginning of the show. Now, what happens is, before the real music begins, the performers will come on stage and they'll tune their instruments and warm up so that it's not silent as the audience waits for the real show. And back when I was in this orchestra, this was my favorite part of the show. And let me tell you why. So while the performers sitting next to me, to my left and right, would always warm up to the Mozart on the music stand right in front of us, I would always use this time for a slightly different reason. So I would sit back in my chair, and off the top of my head, I would improvise, I would jam, I would come up with these different melodies and rhythms. And then I would look out into the audience and pretend like everyone was there to see me. This is my showtime. And some of the ideas I really liked. So on the back of the sheet music in front of me, I would jot down some of the notes so that I could come back to them later. Now, my stand partner, who was the performer sitting next to me on stage, she hated every time I would do this with the music. But I never let her get to me because in my mind, the audience was loving it. And so we would be making these sounds for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden, the lights would dim and the audience would get completely silent. This meant it was time for the conductor to take the stage. Now, at this point in my life, the conductor was the scariest, most intimidating person that I knew. And so as he walked from behind the curtains to come to the front of the stage and step up on the podium, I had to make sure to sit up straight and turn that sheet music back over so that he couldn't see what I was writing on the back. And when he would get to the front of the stage, he would turn around and he would look at us with these piercing eyes as if to let us know that if we embarrassed him at all, he knew exactly who we were. And as he lifted his hands for us to start playing the real music, I was in this predicament. See, because my mind was so fixated on these notes that I was writing on the back of the page, I wasn't as prepared for the real music that sat in front of me. But it was okay because I actually had a plan for this. So whenever I got to a difficult section of the music, I would do something similar to the air guitar. So I'd play the air violin, looking like the greatest professional, but without making a sound at all. And the air violin is almost like an art form in itself. It's almost like synchronized diving in the Olympics, because the worst possible scenario is for the music to end and for you to be the last person moving on stage. Now, in hindsight, I think I was a little too good at the air violin, because after one of these concerts, the conductor came to the next rehearsal and said that we needed to do something called a down the line. And a down the line is like the most intense employee review process you can imagine. So the conductor could pick any part of the music and make any performer stand up to play it one by one in front of the whole orchestra. And of course, the conductor picked a part of the music for which I was a master air violinist. And so he starts calling on people one by one to play. And it's an odd feeling to know that you're the one that he's looking for the whole time. And so now it's my stand partner's turn, which means I'm next. And she stands up to play. And she sounds like Mozart himself. She doesn't miss a note. It was perfect. And when she finishes and lowers to sit back down, she was just smiling at me because she knew what was going to happen to me next. So I stand up to play, and after about 5 seconds, it becomes increasingly obvious that the conductor is just not a fan of the air violin at all. He cuts me off, and at first I'm happy that he put me out of this embarrassment. But before I could sit back down, he tells me in front of everyone that I won't be able to play in the next concert. I stood there embarrassed. So that night, I practiced that part over and over again. And over time, that same right hand technique that I was avoiding so much, that same technique is what allows me to play different rhythms on the violin today. In fact, that first piece of music I just performed for you, I composed it, and I was only able to do so because of that same technique. Now, I often ask, when it comes to our lives and our work, are we writing new music or just playing the notes that have been handed to us in life? But perhaps the greater question is, perhaps the greatest question we can ask today is this. What do we do with the difficult music that's already sitting in front of us? When it comes to the circumstances that make us feel weak, do we avoid them? Do we play the air violin in life? Do we just play the music that makes us sound good? Or do we dare to play the music that will make us stronger? You see, in music and life, the greatest performers are the greatest students. And as a student, the end product of a piece of music is not a beautiful melody, it's not a harmony. The end product is your own development. And the piece of music you play is simply a tool to discover who you are. Therefore, the student does not ask for the music in front of them to become easier. No, they do the work so that one day they will have the ability to play it. And so in life, are you asking for your circumstances to become easier? Or are you asking for the strength to handle it when it comes to the challenge that sits in front of you today? As financial advisors, as partners, as family members? Are you hoping that that challenge goes away? Or are you hoping that it will transform you into something greater? So after I was out of this orchestra for a while, I was looking for places to perform. And I grew up in the DC area, and so I found out about this competition in which the winner would have the chance to perform as a soloist at the Kennedy Center in DC. And it was an incredible opportunity. I prepared for weeks and weeks, but I never forget the moment when I walked into the site of the audition. It felt like I had walked onto one of those early American Idol episodes. I was in this enormous auditorium, all alone on this wide stage, with no one else in the entire building except for these 3 judges sitting right in front of the stage. And guess who was the main judge sitting right there in the middle? The conductor. And I could tell that he was waiting for me. He had my name on a special list off to the side. And so I took a deep breath, but as soon as I lifted my instrument in the air, the judges, the conductor, they simultaneously pulled these bright red pens from out of their pockets. You see, they had my sheet music right in front of them on the table. So anytime I would miss a note, change a beat, they would go wild and mark up this page as much as they could. Now, I'm sure they enjoyed this. I'm sure they had a great time. I bet they went out for beers and cheered to the hopes and dreams that they crushed that day. But as the performer on stage, I could not wait to get out of there. And so I hit the last note with no applause, expecting to never hear from them again. Well, a few days later, it was time for them to announce the winner. And I think they got together and collectively decided on the most nerve-wracking method of doing so. So they didn't call anyone. They didn't email anyone at all. They made everyone come back to the site of the audition on an early Saturday morning and read their name on this tiny little list on this wall. And I remember getting there a bit late. But when I got to the front of the crowd, I couldn't believe it. But for the first time in my life, my name was on the top of that list. I won the competition. Thank you. Thank you. And I knew the conductor had written my name because it was in that same red ink as before. See, the red pen did not mean that my music was hopeless. It simply meant that someone else believed that it had potential to be greater in the future. So the question is, what do we do when we face the red pen in life? What do we do when we are critiqued? Do we avoid it, embrace it? Or perhaps the greater question is, what do we do when the red pen is in our own hands? What do we do when we are in the position to be the conductor, when we have a vision for how the world should be, but the performers around us aren't living up to that standard? Where you see, when the conductor takes the stage, the first thing we see them do is hop up on the podium, right? And this makes them appear more important, taller, wiser than the rest. But we must remember that the podium is simply a tool to help the conductor see others with clarity. The conductor is the most powerful person on stage, but they do not make a sound. What gives them power is their ability to hear the music that's right in front of them. And when the music sounds the worst, that's when they listen the closest. So in life, the question is, why do we so often shut our ears to the sounds that do not match our desires? Why do we turn away from the performers who perhaps need our guidance the most? Perhaps we do this because we're scared that if we look close enough at the imperfections of others, that we might see ourselves. What I'd like to offer to each of you today is that your red pen is not an act of hate. Your red pen is an act of hope. Your frustration towards the imperfections of others is not pessimism. No, it's optimism in its purest form. Because it stems from the belief that you have in someone else's potential. But so often, we use the red pen before we properly communicate the belief that we have in others. And so those that we're trying to lead and guide become defensive. And in moments of conflict, we often point to defensiveness as proof of the other person's inferior character. However, if we were to sneak up on someone and surprise them, we wouldn't be shocked by the fact that they might flinch. We would view their defensiveness as a natural human reflex, and so we must ask, why do we have such empathy for the sensitivities of the body, but lack the same sensitivities, same empathy for the sensitivities of the mind? Perhaps others are defensive because our approach towards them is more like a foreign invader than an ally. Perhaps other people are protecting themselves because we have done nothing to show them that we truly desire to be on stage with them. And so, I invite you to think of someone in your life who you feel compelled to use the red pen on. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a client, a coworker, maybe it's a partner. And as I play this final piece of music, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to simply consider how you might show them when you leave out here today that you believe in the potential of their music. Thank you so much for your time and attention.